Welcome to Washoe Life, a podcast about life right here in Washoe County. I'm Nancy Lewin-Hagen, your Communications Director here at Washoe County.
And I'm Bethany Drysdale, Communications Manager. And we are joined by Pat Hickey, a name probably known to a lot of our listeners one way or another. Legislator, columnist. Tell us about yourself, Pat.
Well, I'm a native Nevadan, had some Irish ancestors that came in the 1870s to the Carson Valley in Lake Tahoe, where I got to grow up, and therefore was a Tahoe boy. I wrote a book about that, and one of the best or funnest set of columns I did was the 14-week walkabout around Lake Tahoe, where I walked around the entire lake with another reporter friend and reflected on how much things had changed since I was a kid growing up there.
Wow. And you also, UNR, you got your master's in journalism.
I did. A little later in life, I had actually done radio before. I went to the legislature, and then people challenged and said, why don't you quit criticizing people and do something about it yourself? So I went and got elected. But I had been doing radio and then got invited to do a column on the legislature, but didn't have any formal training. So I went back and got a master's at our wonderful School of Journalism, the Reynolds School, and it was tremendously helpful to me.
Before we go on, we're going to talk about a number of things. Some of, it's Valentine's Day, so we'll give you that because we're going to talk about your relationship and
my dearly beloved. Okay,
yes, your dearly beloved. I have to know, because I think few people get to the pleasure of growing up in Lake Tahoe. What was that like?
Well, it was a year-round playground, but I had to work in my dad's ice business since I was 9 years old. So while kids were out on the beach, I was wearing a down jacket, bagging cubes or something or other. But it was great growing up. It was very small. I actually went to, and this will tell your listeners how old I am, I went to a one-room schoolhouse in South Tahoe before we got bigger schools. But it was a great place to grow up on Ski Run Boulevard and to ski. And I was the first person to break their leg on Heavenly Valley's gun barrel at 7 years old. Of course, it was on Friday the 13th, the snow day, when my mom warned me not to go. And it wasn't the last time I didn't issue or listen to her warnings. So it was great growing up in Tahoe and great to come back home, which is what I've been able to do with our family.
Absolutely. I have to say, just a little side note, everybody asks why I don't like skiing. I live near ski resorts, why don't you ski? And that's why, because everybody I know who is a good skier has broken a leg or an arm or something. So.
But you still go back, right?
I do still ski. I'm more a fan of the blue runs than the double black diamonds anymore. That's for sure.
Yes. I get that question too. Do you ski? I grew up in Central Illinois, and I can tell you we don't have a lot of mountains.
No, you don't. I've lived there.
Where'd you live?
Chicago.
Nice. All right. It's a great. Yeah. Anyway, but now before we get going on stories and Nevadans and those tales, we're getting close to Valentine's Day, right? It's coming up.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk to you, Pat, about this really incredibly beautiful love story that you have with your wife. And as I read and learn more about you, I didn't realize it was an arranged marriage. So can you tell us about that?
Well, I think everybody would like to think that their union was arranged somehow from heaven, or a match made there. We were introduced by some people that we knew together. It was part of our faith at the time. And it was a prolonged engagement, but a very romantic one, because we spent about 2 years communicating before we met. So sending tapes of me trying to sing John Denver songs, or photographs of her on a mountainside in Korea that I would stare at for hours. So it was, kind of an invisible courtship for a couple of years. But then when we finally got to meet and eventually marry, it's been really special. And we are coming up on 50 years. So that's something I'm really, really happy to look back upon.
And your last column in the RGJ for last year was about this upcoming 50th anniversary and why you're taking a break from writing your columns. You are writing something else, kind of a love letter.
Well, I am. I am doing a book about my wife. We're not quite sure what to call it yet. It may just be Myung-hee because she's Korean, or it may be Myung-hee, Her American Life, because she's had quite an incredible life since coming here. But I mentioned that in the column, which I'd been doing Memo from the Middle for the RGJ for about 5 years. And it just was the thought I should really just kind of put that aside for a little while, take a little break, kind of refresh myself, and more importantly, focus on the memories that we share together. And the fun thing about writing a book like this is you can sit down with your partner and just talk about all the incredible things you did while traveling, while raising children, while going through the struggles and the memorable, beautiful moments that we had in places. So we get to do that. Every time I kind of stumble into a new chapter, we spend 35 or 45 minutes pillow talk about what those times were and what they meant to her, because it's really a book for only one person in that sense, and that's the person I'm writing it for.
And how different is it? Because you've written quite a few books.
Well, a couple of books and a lot of columns.
A lot of columns. I
Yeah.
mean, you've published a lot. Now this is totally different. Your
Well,
spouse.
Well, it is, but it's an audience of one. But it's a great reflection. You know, the book that I most recently had published, Here and the Hereafter, was with about 34 notable, quotable Nevadans, Harry Reid, Mike Tyson, Brian Sandoval, Frankie Sudell Pop, a whole host of people that most of your listeners would know and maybe you're curious about, because I sure was. But most of them being a little bit older, we're beginning to do something that maybe we all do at a certain point, and that's have kind of a life review and look back at the meaningful times in their life, their legacy as they maybe expect or hope that it might be. And the bigger question, which I asked, which was kind of a fun one to some of these folks, do they think that life exists beyond our present life and existence? And that was interesting to hear the myriad of points of view that people had.
Yes. We've read a lot of those. So and it is interesting. And all faiths, too, from these people.
True. Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
That I found that really interesting as I was reading through it. There really are a lot of different faiths, but also different perspectives within those faiths. Did anything surprise you as you were writing it?
Well, what surprised me was even for the strongest of believers, and I put those in quotes, I mean, whatever their particular theological or religious worldview was, and those that didn't have one at all, like Penn Jillette, the magician from Penn and Teller, who's an avid and a very compelling atheist with great values and a wonderful love for humanity without a religion. But the interesting thing was how embracing people were, even if they had very strong beliefs. So I'd ask people, if you go to heaven, whatever heaven might be, do you expect only see members of your own faith or persuasion there? And almost everyone to a person said, I really hope I can see people from all the various faith traditions or beliefs there. And so that was kind of reassuring to think that heaven in the minds of at least some people is maybe bigger than we sometimes think down here.
I like that too. I like it how you got perspectives just from just such a broad range of people on such a big topic.
Yeah, Mike Tyson was fun. Of course, he's had a number of near-death experiences and some recent psychedelic experiences. So his conclusion was, I've seen death and it's overrated. I guess that was reassuring.
I have to say, this is the book. I did not expect to get some real wisdom from Mike Tyson. Reading his chapter, this guy, he's seen some things and he's got some wisdom to share.
Well, he's a voracious reader. Not everybody knows that about him, but he is. So he's read an awful lot and thought an awful lot and had a pretty interesting life to go on with it. So, and so have many people in that book.
Yeah. I made a note of something that you quoted him saying, God is bigger than any one religion and he didn't make us to kill each other.
Yeah.
That's so profound. That's great.
Yeah, is he said that before he got into the ring and almost found out in his last fight if there was an afterlife or not.
I think he's sure saw stars or in that.
Well, I think he saw the IRS. It still feels like he owes them a bit.
Right. Yeah, there's that.
And Lance Gilman as a meditator, I didn't picture that. That surprised me.
That's one interesting dude. Yeah, build it and they will come. I mean, he was kind of that person that had, if you will, a vision or a premonition about what the Tahoe Regional Center trick could be out there. And of course, with some backing, was able to fulfill it. But quite an interesting, introspective guy. It was a little interesting to talk with him about how he meshed all those things with owning one of the brothels out there at Mustang. But, we're all a combination of sometimes contradictions and sometimes very interesting things about us.
One thing that when I read the chapter with Harry Reid, and you mentioned how hard it is to interview him, and I thought, wow, someone so public and does so many interviews.
Well, he was really at the latter stages of his time here on planet Earth. And one of the funny things, one of the stories about Harry Reid is he would always, with reporters, hang up on them when he was done. Even at his memorial, President Obama said that he would have conversations when the senator was the majority leader. And when he was done, he wouldn't say, well, I got to go, or see you later, Barack, or he would just hang up the phone. In my case, he didn't do that with me. I not because I was so fascinated. I think he was so old that he really liked talking a lot more than maybe he used to when he was quite busy heading the U.S. Senate. But I mean, it wasn't easy to get some of those. But it was during COVID when people had more time on their hands and were given somewhat to thinking about their lives and what it all meant, and even the possibility of human mortality being more real than we sometimes reckoned with before we lived through COVID.
Oh, so why did you did the here? You're talking to Nevadans here, but why the hereafter? What started this thought in your head? I'm going to talk to these Nevadans and find out what they think is next.
Well, I've always been curious about the afterlife myself. I didn't want to write a book about it. After all, I'm not the avatar of the new age or have any special insights into it. But like many of the people who described them in the book, I had experiences once when I was a young person to see myself in it wasn't a dream, but I saw myself at my own funeral and wondered why everybody else didn't know that I was still around, or so I thought at the moment. So I've always been curious about it. So I thought, rather than writing about it myself and putting forth a bunch of other experts' ideas, I just, among the many questions I asked the Nevadans, what do they personally think about it? And have they had, and many of them had, really profound experiences with passed away spouses or parents or loved ones, and saw things, heard things that led them to kind of feel that there's more than meet the eyes. Even cynical journalists like John Ralston, who's non-religious, admittedly so in every regard, but he said, I've always had the sense that there's something more than this and life doesn't end here. Well, I guess we'll all wait and see.
Isn't it interesting, though, what you've done throughout your whole career, and it seems to that root of journalism comes back in your storytelling, and you're writing your weekly, or you're writing a book, or you're writing something for your wife.
Yeah. Well, I guess good journalists, I'm not so sure I was one. I mean, I even came to that kind of later in life, but they're curious. I think that's the main thing. If you're truly interested in others, you can usually have pretty good interviews because, as you know, people love to talk about themselves.
We all do. I am personally kind of fascinated with Oscar Goodman. I love the mob history of Las Vegas. So his chapter, I went almost straight to that. What was that like, interviewing him?
Oh, this guy is a hoot.
Yeah.
He, former mob mayor, played himself in the movie Casino, right? He actually wrote a letter this is a funny story, to the first publisher of the book, saying that if they didn't get it done this year, because he's like a number of people, a bit elderly, or getting up there. He said if they don't publish this by the end of the year, he was going to have them all whacked.
Sounds about right.
Half jokingly. But, fascinating man. I mean, and the thing you drew from him and a lot of others was the influence that their parents had upon them. His dad was, I think, a Philadelphia attorney as well. But rather than coddling him or considering him a victim, when he was a Jewish young person that had to walk through an Irish neighborhood in South Philly to get to school every day, and would be typically roused and fought with some of the Irish kids, and then they play ball later in the day. His dad didn't turn him into a victim. He said, I'll give you boxing lessons and things like that. So just stories like that. And a parent who would sit with he and his sister for 2 hours at night and have them review their homework on a blackboard down in the home's basement to make sure that they were ready for school the next day. Well, it turned him also into a pretty good lawyer, even though he was representing some pretty questionable characters at parts of his career.
But a job's a job, right?
Yeah.
And you also highlight some very strong women and younger women, Mayor Sheevey, Hillary Sheevey, and Abby Whitaker.
Both fascinating young women. Now, being a Renoite, actually, Mayor Sheevey lived in the house across the street from us for a period of life. So we go way back. But she's fascinating because she's gone through a lot in her life, and the book details it. I mean, just her skating career that was cut short because of health reasons, and like John Ralston had her sibling replace a kidney, I guess, and this experience she's had with her family. There's been a lot of joy and a lot of heartache, and she's quite honest about it. But she's also quite, like many, reflective and almost spiritual about things, and looking for the deeper meaning and the way to embrace the circumstances. Abby Whitaker, of course, is a total hoot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the title of hers was the Fallon Firecracker, and
He is a fire.
yeah, she
For that.
she is. I mean,
Yes.
she told about country line dancing, beer, and tire fires out most of the latter years of her days in high school at Fallon High. But, fascinating, and also just the love that many of these people have for Nevada. Whether they were born, she's originally from English, but I mean, people that come here, they just fall in love with the spirit of Nevada that just allows people to be themselves and to be authentic. And she was a great interview, including telling me about her wild turkey that they eventually took care of at Thanksgiving time, who chased Senator Heidi Gansert around their yard one day.
I think you kind of touched on a thread that runs through this. It is so Nevadan. The people in here are so Nevadan. And so I think one of the neat things about Nevadans, they are willing to talk and share stories, talking about your belief in the afterlife. That's a rather personal thing, but there's just the spirit of openness and pride in each of these people.
Well, and some of them were very unique Nevadans. One of the persons I interviewed is James Allen Jr. No one would know him unless you followed police blogs, because he was domiciled on death row for 28 years before then Governor Kenny Gwinn and Attorney General Brian Sandoval paroled him, not pardoned him, because he had been such a good prisoner after he had killed a man, admittedly so, and very sorrowfully admitting it when he was 19 years old, but eventually got out of that. So his, if you will, near-death experience was almost going to, if we did that anymore, an electric chair or whatever is done these days, and then having a life that's been recovered as a result of that, and the good that he's doing, and the forgiveness that he felt, and he hopes, talking about the afterlife, he carries a picture of his victim on the back of his Bible. And I talked to him, he said, well, when I go upstairs, he's the first person I want to go and say I'm sorry to. So, moving stories just about people and the things they've gone through in life. Some of them that had serious health challenges, like Peter Knott, the legendary PR guy with R&R Partners, who had a very serious bout with cancer that absolutely transformed the way he looks at life and the way he lives his life.
I do like what Bethany's saying, the thread of like Mitch Fox. I've known him, I've known about him for so long, and then just to read the backstories, that was interesting. From Vegas and
very, very much so, and talking during Steve Sebelius, another the political reporter from the Review-Journal for years, who no one knew he was necessarily a Democrat, but he worked at a very conservative Republican newspaper, the Review-Journal, but had such respect as a journalist that he was kept by them for decades. But very interesting insights into the world of journalism, and from those like Mitch Fox or Steve Sebelius or John Ralston for that matter, who have really have approached their profession with a very admirable attitude for the most part. Although not everybody likes John Ralston, including myself when I used to be on his show.
I remember those shows. Oh yeah, it was like firecrackers. Yeah, many times.
I have such respect for him, and I am terrified of him.
At the same time, yes.
Yeah, he's crazy smart.
So talking to all these people with all these different perspectives on, what's next or, humanity, did that change your perspective at all?
I guess more than anything, it reassured me about the goodness of people. And not only there are some rich and famous ones in there, but how reassuring it was just to see how normal, if that's the right word, they are about the things that are most important to life. Elaine Wynn, the most important thing to her. And when she hired Poonam Mather, the legendary woman in her own right, when Poonam told her, I just want to be a mother, she said, you're hired. Because she looks at that. And now Elaine Wynn is the billionaire beneficiary of Wynn Properties, and her husband, sadly, is fairly and completely discredited. But to her family, the values that she shares with her children and her grandchildren are the most important things of life, regardless of the size of bank accounts.
Let's go back to your love story.
Ah.
Right? What do your kids think about this?
Well, it's not fun having a father who writes things and sometimes includes you in them, like I did in my book Tahoe Boy. So they're, they know Pops is Pops, so they deal with it. But we have had 4 children. They've all been very wonderful. 2 of them live in Nevada, and two of our daughters both live in Atlanta with their families and grandchildren. So, we had the privilege of, and my wife being Asian, 3 generations in the household is quite common in places like Korea. We were able to have that in our home, in that my 100-year-old father, World War II veteran, was able to live with us until he was 100.
Wow.
And he was quite healthy and cantankerous the whole time. And it was just so special to see the bond between he and my wife that developed. Even when he was someone, given his World War II life, was a little bit reserved or not exactly excited about me marrying someone from another race or another culture, but it all worked out to the end. And in the end, he felt sorry for my wife that she ended up with me.
I think it's a good sign when your parents like your spouse better than you. I think there's a good dynamic
too. Yeah.
I'm sure my parents like my husband better than they like me.
I know that was a fact. My mom's gone, but it was a fact with me as well.
And you're successful.
Yeah.
So 50 years in, what advice do you have for the rest of us?
God, we can't let you go before you tell us that.
Well, I hope you get lucky like I did, although we obviously every marriage that lasts or endures or family, folks have to work at it, and you learn to complement, not contradict the differences that you both have, and whether it's the approach to raising children or business or life or whatever. You know, if you live that long together, you kind of become like one person, and we're really enjoying our sort of retirement now with traveling. We're going to Bali and Korea this year. We're going to Montana to search for old relatives of mine there that I haven't seen for ages. And we, it's special to grow old with someone. I guess that's the first line of the book. So we've grown old together.
I love it. What a great message for us here on Valentine's Day, Pat Hickey.
Hey. Do I get any chocolates before I leave?
Shoot. Put those at home. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on and talk with us.
This is a great thing. I love. I just thought that how neat that you guys are doing it in such a personalized way. And I mean, people look at government and its bureaucracy, but you're putting a human face on people and things that go on in our community. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We love having rich discussions with people like you, and what a blessing you are to this state.
Thank you both.
Thank you. All right. And for those listening, if you have a great idea of somebody that we should be talking to on this podcast, let us know. You can shoot an email to washoe311